Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. My name is Nisha Trivedi, and I'm a senior consultant at mbaMission. And today I'm here to talk to you about managing being waitlisted. It can be a tough situation, but luckily I'm here to give you 6 tips, strategies on what you can do immediately and for the next several weeks in order to maximize your chances and to make sure that your profile is as strong as it can be. And so first I thought I'd walk you through a little bit about what it means to be waitlisted. And what I always like to say, because it's true, is that you should be cautiously optimistic. The schools have thousands of candidates who they evaluate every year. And when they waitlist a candidate, it really does mean that they're genuinely interested in their candidacy. They would not put a candidate on a wait list if they weren't truly interested and if they didn't think that that candidate could be a viable addition to the class. So if you have been waitlisted by a program or more than one program, just know that the school genuinely is interested in your candidacy. But it also means that the school needs more information before it can make a decision on your candidacy. The schools every year, they get many, many applicants, and so many of them are qualified, and they really do feel that they make a great addition to the class and they make terrific contributions. But at the end of the day, one of their biggest dilemmas is having too few spots for many people. So, and on top of that, they have to build a diverse class in terms of profession, in terms of nationality, in terms of gender, basically every dimension that you can think of. And so inevitably it becomes a numbers game. And towards the end, they're really just shaping the class to see, okay, how do we build a class that that we feel is diverse, that conforms to the number that we have, the number of spots we have available in the class, and that often leads them to make tough decisions. And so often the difference between being waitlisted and admitted is actually really small. Sometimes a candidate will ask me, I'm waitlisted, what did I do wrong? And many, many times, or they'll ask me, what's missing? And I'll say many times, it's not as though something is necessarily missing or that you really significantly fell short. It's just, at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. And so, while not everything is in your control, there are, as I mentioned, some strategies that you can undertake in order to maximize your chances. And so if you are waitlisted, here are the things to do. So first of all, to do immediately, the first thing is to confirm your spot on the waitlist. That might sound obvious, but different schools have different directions. Sometimes you have to opt in via the application portal through a drop-down menu. Other times you don't have to do anything. You just have to email them if you're opting out of the waitlist, if you've made other plans. So make sure to pay attention to each and every program's instructions to see what you need to do to make sure that you're still being considered. And then along with that, you want to review any information that the school has provided. Often they have an FAQ portal on their website with frequently asked questions of waitlisted candidates. What are next steps? They might give you information on how many times you can provide updates to the admissions committee, who your main point of contact is, or you might get an email directly from your main point of contact at admissions. Make sure you read that too. And oftentimes the schools also have webinars or chats that are set up for waitlisted students for them to ask questions and to get information on where to go from here. So just make sure that you take advantage of those resources in front of you. And then what you'll want to do is you'll want to assess your profile. Some schools, although I've seen not most schools, do provide feedback to waitlisted candidates, but I would say the vast majority do not. And so what you'll need to do is assess your own profile to see, where might there be opportunity for me to strengthen it? Is it going to be through a higher test score? Is it going to be through a work accomplishment? So there might be things where you already see an area of opportunity. And one of the ways you can do that is to see for each of the schools, what are their stats in terms of GPA, in terms of GMAT, maybe it's in terms of years of work experience, those basic things. And then also just kind of looking at your application and thinking, in what ways might this be even better? And what can I do about that? And next, I'll take you through, what are some aspects of your profile that you might be able to strengthen between now and the end of the decision process over the next several weeks to maximize your chances of getting admitted. So there are certain categories of areas that you can address over the coming weeks. First, if your GMAT or your GRE or your EA, depending on what you took, is below the average of students admitted to the course, or even if it's right around the average, you might consider taking it again, especially if you feel that the attempt that you submitted with the exam maybe wasn't fully reflective of your abilities. Maybe if you feel like you had more time, you might be able to get an even higher score. And especially if you feel that the quant or the verbal section was lower than what you're capable of, then you can consider taking it again. And if you just do decide to go this route, what you'll want to do is, once you figure out what your test date is, contact the admissions committee, through the channel that they requested, whether it's an email or elsewhere in the portal, to let them know that you are retaking the test, what the date is, and that way they can look out for your test score once it's available. So that's something you can, of course, consider doing. Or if you feel that, my test score is as good as it can be, but there's an opportunity for me to show my quantitative skills better, or my undergrad GPA maybe wasn't that great. I had the high test score, but I still feel there could be some concerns about my academic capabilities. In that case, what you can do is you can take a supplemental course. And, in the case of many applicants, they're trying to boost the quantitative aspect of the profile. And to those candidates, I very much recommend quantitative courses. The extension courses that I most often recommend are UC Berkeley. It's called Math for Management. UCLA Extension also has courses in statistics and other areas. There's also a non-graded course called mbaMath. It's shorter and it's going to be less rigorous than the other two, but if you're really in a time crunch, then that's an option as well, and it is well respected by the school. So those are just a few examples. Somebody in the chat had asked about Coursera courses, courses from edX. What I would say is, yes, there are many online courses out there. What you want to make sure, though, is that preferably it's a graded course, because that's going to carry the most weight with the admissions committee. And of course, that's rigorously quantitative, which is usually where people are looking to boost up that profile. Getting that A grade is going to provide the admissions committee even more reassurance that the core curriculum of the MBA program isn't going to be an issue. So those are the courses and the test scores. Then there's also work-related achievements. If you've had accomplishments at work since you applied, and you're waitlisted, the admissions committee is certainly going to want to hear about them. And so examples of these work achievements are, first of all, if you get a promotion, certainly you'll want to tell the admissions committee right away. Or if you move into a new position, maybe it's more of a lateral move, but it's going to involve whole new responsibilities, then that's certainly a significant achievement as well. Or let's say if you get an award at work, you get an Employee of the Month recognition, or you get a team award for a project that you push through in record time under budget. That's definitely an example of an accomplishment. Or maybe you've gotten significant increases in responsibility. Maybe you didn't have a direct report before, and now all of a sudden that's changed. Or you're working on a very high visibility project with upper management. Then those are the types of professional achievements that the admissions committee will want to hear about for sure. Then other ways that you can strengthen your candidacy. Some schools, though not all, are open to an additional recommendation. You want to make sure, first of all, that the school will accept it. And oftentimes their FAQ document or in the waitlist chat or the webinar, they'll specifically give this information. And so if the school will accept an additional recommendation, you could ask somebody else in your professional life to write that letter. Just make sure that it's additive, that it can provide a new perspective versus the letter or the letters that you'd already submitted with your application. Many schools also would value an alumni endorsement. And so this is where if there's a student or an alum of the school who knows you well, they can provide a more informal note to admissions, vouching for you as a candidate. So that's something you could get for each school. But you want to make sure you watch quality over quantity. So it's much better to get one strong alumni endorsement or one strong letter of recommendation, depending on who's available, versus just trying to get a whole bunch. You want to be very selective about who you ask and what you end up submitting there. And then next, you want to make sure you keep engaging with the program. Schools want to feel wanted. And so they're going to want to see that you're still engaging with the program. And so you can keep going to information sessions. And if they have virtual class visits or any other types of events of this nature, go to those. And then even more valuable are if you can set up individual chats with students or alum, whether it's through some of these info sessions. Sometimes they give you the contact info of student ambassadors, or if it's through people on LinkedIn, or if it's former colleagues or friends who have gone to these schools. If you can set up individual chats with them to ask them more about their experience and get some advice, that can be very valuable. And then in your waitlist update, it probably wouldn't be a standalone update, but along with any other updates you're providing to the admissions committee, you can let them know that, by the way, I spoke to this person, they told me about this resource, which I didn't know before, and now I'm even more excited to attend your program. And that kind of thing can make an impact, because they'll see that you're still engaging with the community and you're still very much interested in being a part of the class. And then aside from that, you'll want to continue or accelerate any community involvement or professional or personal development, rather, that you have. So let's say you're already in an activity. For example, you're a volunteer. Maybe you volunteer at a shelter, or you deliver meals. Maybe there's an opportunity to elevate your involvement. For example, being a team leader of other volunteers. That's definitely something that you should consider, because that can help show the admissions committee that you're making progress and that you're taking on leadership responsibilities and developing those skills. And then also, let's say you have, certain interests, like you've always liked to run, you're thinking about running for that, you're running that half marathon this summer. Well, now's the time to make that decision, right? Because it's something that can just help the admissions committee understand how well-rounded you are. And it's a way to really put some concrete achievements around your passion. So if there is something that you're considering doing, whether it's writing that article, whether it's running that half marathon, whether it's entering that cooking competition, then now's the time to do it. And depending on how that goes, that's something that you could potentially include in a larger admissions committee update as well. So those are my tips in terms of the things that you can do to really maximize your chances of getting off the wait list. But then, you'll want to really think about your candidacy holistically and make sure that you have a plan B, whether it's, pursuing other applications, in the coming months, or, if the wait list doesn't work out, thinking about what's my strategy for the next application cycle, or what is the position I can take, or what can I do at work to get even closer to my post-MBA goals before I apply again, if I decide to do that. So even as you're figuring out what to do about the wait list and maximizing your chances, you want to think about the bigger picture and what's the plan B, because, as we know in the MBA admissions world, it can be unpredictable, and you want to make sure that you're prepared for any situation. So that's the formal part of the presentation. Thanks so much for listening. And I see that there's some questions that have popped up in the comments. So I'm going to see if there's anything I can help answer. Let's see. And then, so I answered the question about the course. And somebody has a question about a PMP certification for one of the waitlists. Yes. So the project management certification is very well respected. So I would say if, let's say something like a PMP or another certification that you're thinking of pursuing anyway, because it's relevant to your job, then by all means, go ahead and do it. And that's something that you can update the admissions committee on, and they do respect those types of certifications. So if it's something that's in the natural course of your work, then go ahead and pursue that, and then you can update the admissions committee upon securing that certification. Great. Any other questions? I'll look out for them in the comment box. Okay, so there's actually a question on, is it too late to apply in the third round? I would say that for schools that have 3 admissions rounds, round 3 is tough because I would say about 85% of the spots are filled in round 1 and round 2. And then round 3 is more of like a shaping round, which means that the schools are looking to see, of the spots we have left, how do we make sure that we're building as diverse of a class as possible? So round 3 is quite competitive. I generally don't recommend applying in round 3 as a first choice. If it really is the best time for you to apply, then, by all means, to go for it. There's nothing to lose, but at the same time, it is, the odds are lower or in round 3. So one thing you might consider if you're considering round 3 is, would it be better for me to apply in round 1 in the 2022-2023 cycle? So that's definitely something to consider, because by then the field will be wide open again, and the summer when the applications open up, that's going to be around the corner as well. Yeah, and another question, a couple questions actually came up about the GMAT. Is the updated score going to help? It certainly can if the GMAT is something where there's an area of opportunity. And then another question is, can a high GMAT score outweigh a low GPA and work experience? It's a holistic process. So it's rarely that a GMAT score is just going to, save everything in the application process. But sometimes a high GMAT score can help offset a lower GPA, especially, if you had some extenuating circumstances in college that might have led to the lower GPA. So it really does depend on how strong the other elements of your profile are, including your work experience, because with your work experience, you're going to want to see progression and impact. And I would say also that if for candidates who have less work experience, like maybe only 2-3 years, then certainly the admissions committee is going to be taking a close look at the academics because because that's one of the big things that they have to go on. Okay, and then somebody is asking about waitlist timing. If you've been on a waitlist for, let's say, a month from a program, yeah, I would say that it's pretty rare that somebody gets off the waitlist in just a month or so. Usually, they make decisions after each round of acceptances. So let's say you're waitlisted after round 1. Each school does vary, but it's usually when they finish evaluating, or when they're in the middle of evaluating round 2 applications, that they get a sense of, okay, how many spots are we going to be able to offer, or how many people are we going to take off the round 1 waitlist? So usually those decisions come at certain points during the cycle, although a decision can be made anytime, but usually they're made at certain points of the cycle. So if you've just been waitlisted for about a month at this point, then certainly there's still weeks ahead, and anything can happen. Let's see. And then another question is, do schools go back to reviewing the waitlist candidates only when they still have spaces left? Yeah, well, I would say that they evaluate candidates on an ongoing basis because you never know when there's a spot left, or, again, they're trying to build a diverse class. So they're really taking a look at everything. But they do have certain checkpoints generally, and generally those line up with the admissions rounds. And then that way they can see, okay, how are things shaping up? How many of our round 1 candidates who we got extended offers to, how many of them have accepted the spots? And then by then they'll kind of see, okay, what is our yield rate looking like? And then how many spots are we going to have for round 2, potentially for round 3? So I would say it's more of an ongoing review. Once they are at the end of the review and they don't have spaces left, generally that's when they release the rest of their decisions. They might hold on to a few more people just in case there's any last minute changes, somebody doesn't show up to school, but generally, they at some point, generally it's going to be late spring or summer. That's when they'll close the wait list. So that's generally how that works. And then another question, good question. How should I communicate the updates to my profile? Yes, so this is going to vary by school. A lot of schools, it's more freeform. You have a waitlist email, and then you can issue updates in that email. And for those schools, there's no restriction on the length or the number of updates. For those schools that don't have rigid instructions, what I usually say is, let's say every 6 weeks or so, 4 to 6 weeks, that's when you can issue an update to them if you have something material in your candidacy based on the 6 factors that I mentioned that you feel like you want to share with them. So you want to kind of stay in touch and keep these updates in mind. And then some schools, though, are a lot more set on how they want to receive updates. So, for example, Harvard Business School, I think for the round 1 waitlisted candidates, you had to submit an update by a certain date, and it could only be a certain length, and it had to go into a box in a portal. And so really you want to pay attention to the instructions, because they'll let you know exactly what format you should use for the waitlist. Updates, how frequently you can submit these updates, who should receive them, how long they should be, and all of that stuff. So just make sure you pay very close attention to that. And then a couple more questions here about courses. I would say, Coursera and EDX, like, I don't think a lot of those courses are not graded. So if you really feel that you need to demonstrate your, let's say, your quantitative ability or your verbal ability, and if you feel like you've maximized the test, because the test is the priority here, then I would go for a graded course. And in that case, I would recommend something like UCLA Extension, UC Berkeley Extension, those courses, because those are rigorous, and they're well respected by the admissions committee. And so those are the courses I would recommend. There's another course called HBX Core. It's very rigorous and intense. It's basically Harvard Business School's pre-MBA prep course, but that generally takes several months to complete. If you're on the wait list, then that timing might not work for you. It's something I generally recommend to candidates who are still applying, or their application days are still way ahead of them. Then they might have the time for that course. But if you're if you're waitlisted now and you need to take a course, I would recommend, again, UCLA Extension or UC Berkeley Extension, or you can take a local course in finance or accounting, microeconomics, statistics, something quantitative. It can be at any accredited institution. It can be at a local community college. It can be in person or online, depending on what's feasible right now. And the most important thing is that it's graded, and it's if the quantitative part is what you're trying to boost up, that it's a quantitative course, like one of the ones that I mentioned. So those are the ones that I would take a look at first, I think, before Coursera. Another question, LinkedIn Learning, same thing. I think a lot of those courses are not graded. You're given a certification at the end. So I would look at a graded course first. And then another question, will courses related to management fundamentals or analytic beginners help? I would say something in analytics could be helpful. Again, if you're trying to boost that quantitative part of your profile, analytics, I think, can certainly help. I would say courses on management, leadership, that probably not as much, unless that's something that you really feel that you're going to need for work anyway. And then you can go ahead and provide it in the update as well that you've taken that. But if the priority is taking a course for the admissions process, then really see, what is that area that you're trying to strengthen, and take a course directly for that. Let's see. So same with, I think business fundamentals, something like something that's quantitative in nature, I think is going to be an effective course to take. And then another question I got was, how about a second recommendation in the case of something like Columbia Business School, who only required one letter of recommendation? There I would, take a look at the waitlist FAQs to see, and the events to see, are they open to another letter of recommendation? If they are, you would really want to make sure that it provides a different perspective. So for example, if you got one already from your primary job, you got your boss wrote one, you probably don't want to get one from their boss, because it's probably not going to provide a hugely different perspective unless they have a completely different relationship with you. In that case, you might want to get it from somebody else who can speak to your strengths and your results in a different way. That's what I'm thinking as well. And then also for Columbia, there's also, aside from the formal recommendations, there's the alumni or student endorsement. So if there's an alum or student you know particularly well who can really vouch for you, then that's something that they can submit as well. And typically the students or alumni have instructions from the school on how they can do that. So that's a route that you could pursue as well. Let's see. And then in terms of job offers, if you're contemplating switching jobs, I would let the admissions committee know once that's set, right? Once you've accepted the offer, you can let them know, what is the job in the company? What do you expect to do? And what is it that excites you about this position that you're about to embark on, right? Maybe you're getting more responsibility. Maybe it's taking you closer to your post-MBA goals. So if you switch jobs, those are the types of details you'd want to share with them. But to answer the question that's in the comments, you'd want to wait until it's a done deal, until you've made your decision. Let's see. And then if you have a high quantitative score in the GMAT or the GRE, then, in that case, unless you scored poorly in your undergrad classes in quant, you probably don't need to focus on a quant course. I would think about, where do you need to strengthen it? If your overall score was high and it was above the average for the school, if you really think you can do better, you can take the GMAT or GRE again. But I would suggest the course only if there's something in the GMAT that you're trying to offset, whether it's quant or verbal, or something in your undergrad GPA. And in that case, I would look to see, where were the areas of weakness? Maybe everything quantitative strong. Maybe the areas in terms of verbal or language were lower. In that case, you might want to take a different type of course. It might be more focused on writing or leadership or something like that. So it really depends on what exactly you're trying to offset in your profile. And then another question is about that alumni or student endorsement that I was talking about. How long should it be? I would say they want to keep it pretty brief. It's not going to be as long as a letter of recommendation, right? So for example, Columbia Business School, the recommendation is going to be about 1,000 words, right? 500 words for each question, more or less. The alumni or student endorsement will not be that long. I expect it to be maybe a couple paragraphs, and that's about it. About, how do they know you, and what capacity, and for what reasons do they feel that you would be a fit for the class, right? Based on the school's culture, based on what they feel you'd contribute, that sort of thing. So it will be pretty brief, a couple paragraphs at the most, I would say. Oh, another question about the GMAT. Will the low IR, integrated reasoning score, or the AWA, can it make a negative impact? Schools are still figuring out how exactly they're using the IR. I would say if your IR score is lower than a 5 or so, that's something to think about. Is that something that you can pull up? The AWA, if you get a 4.0 or above, then you don't need to worry about the AWA, I would say, the analytical writing assessment. If you scored lower than that, then you might see, is that something that you could potentially pull up? Or are there other indications in your application that the language skills won't be a problem for you? So I would say if you get below the 4 or 5 on the IR, below a 4 on the analytical writing assessment, then that is something to think about. But if you have those scores or above, then it should be okay. Let's see. So if you have a high undergrad GPA and a GMAT, do you need to focus on quant courses? Probably not. I would say it depends on what you do at work. If you have a heavily analytical job and you have an overall high GPA and an overall high GMAT score, then I would say probably less important for you to take a course, is my guess. And then I would look at the other, some of the other tips I shared to see what are other ways that you can strengthen your profile. Or it might be a numbers game. Sometimes it is about weighting, which is tough, I know, for sure. But sometimes it's just about kind of giving them time to shape the class. Okay. Any last questions? Okay, another question is, when's the right time to send updates to schools? Before the round 2 deadline or after some time later on? I would say that it really depends. If you have a material update, like let's say you got a higher GMAT score, you got a promotion, then you would want to let them know right away. Because those are material changes to your candidacy and you want to let them know right away. But of course, you want to pay attention to the directions of the schools. If not, then I would use your judgment. I would say if it's not something big like that, then you'd want to group your updates. Like let's say you have a new letter of recommendation, or you have a new a new activity you joined, or something smaller like that. Then you probably do want to batch your updates to a certain extent, so that way you're not sending them a bunch of little notes, and you can send those every 4 to 6 weeks. So I wouldn't say you have to worry so much about what the school's deadlines are, but in your case, think about what updates do I have? Do I have any updates to share at this time? Or do I have any updates that need to be shared right away? Like I said, like a promotion or a higher test score. Let's say, and then in terms of GMAT waivers, I think it's tough because, if you have a waiver, it can, they've basically shown that, you've shown the quantitative proficiency, especially, or the proficiency, and you don't need the waiver. But it can be challenging if, let's say if you have a lower GPA, or if you're from a very heavily represented background, then sometimes it can be a benefit to have that GMAT. So it's a little tricky with the waiver, and I think it depends school by school. But certainly, even if you got the waiver, if you feel that you can get a score that's above the average of the school, then it might be something that's worth considering. But only if you feel like you can exceed the average. Okay, and there's one more question about PMP certification. So again, about certifications, if it's something that you're planning to take for your job, then certainly update the school once you have that certification. It can only help. The schools do value these certifications, and this is, regardless of what your post MBA goal is. If you're in a job, or if your post MBA goals would be helped by that certification, it's even better. But I would say that it's something, if you really genuinely feel that it's going to be good for your job, regardless of the MBA application process. Great. So I think that's all the questions we have, it looks like. So again, thank you so much for joining me for this presentation, and very best of luck to you with the MBA application process. And yep, if you're on the wait list, then I wish you the best of luck with that process, and I hope that everything works out in your favor. Thank you.